Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. Today, I'm actually really excited to do this video, and I want to talk to you guys about it really fast before we do it. Don't skip ahead. What we're going to be, in this video, there's basically going to be two versions available. So you guys are going to be watching the short version right now. That's the video that you're on. However, when I originally recorded this video, I recorded it basically, just sat down, recorded the video very raw, and kind of worked on this part of the project straight through. It ended up taking, it's like an hour and a half video. It's very long, but there's a lot of really good stuff in there, especially if you're new to Vue.js components. I talk a lot about Vue components and how Vue works and stuff like that. So basically, I'm giving you guys a choice right now. You guys can continue watching this video. This is going to go through building the component. I'm going to show you guys here on screen what it looks like. But this is going to go through building the component and then just kind of quickly go through it. There's a lot of steps, so we're just going to blaze through it. If you guys want a little bit more information about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, more information about Vue.js components and specifics around that, if you find the Vue or the JavaScript in this video confusing, you may want to go over and watch at least part or all of the long video, which again, it's an hour and a half. I know that's super long. These are literally going to be two versions of the same video. One goes into lots of detail. This one, we're going to blaze through it really quickly. So you pick your poison, decide what you guys want. If you guys want the long version, down in the description, I'm going to put it up towards the top of the description. You guys can watch the long version. And then this one, we're going to jump in right now and start the shorter version, okay? There's still a lot to cover, but we're going to cut through it a lot faster. Okay, so what is the goal of today's video? We're going to be building a Vue.js component, and the point of it is to build this slug editor, basically, to manage the slug for our blog post. So let me give you a demonstration of what it's going to be, what it's going to look like from the beginning, and then we'll go in and actually start working with it. So here you can see this is our blog post here. This whole component right here is a Vue.js component. What we're going to do here is as we type in our title, it automatically calculates a title for us that is applicable for slugs. So it's going to get rid of spaces. It's going to add hyphens. If we have something like apostrophes, which are not valid in URLs, it's going to figure that out and just get rid of them. This even works if you're doing things like accents. So if you're working with accents in other languages and stuff, it should be able to figure out that, okay, so you've got that accent there. It just converts it into the traditional letter, right? Just like that. So, all right, now with that being said, it has a few other features. So if we had hello world here, you can see no matter what I do, it changes basically to match the title. Now, if at any point you want to edit it, you can click edit. It pops it up in an input window here. And now you have the option to change it if you wanted. Of course, if you cancel out, it'll continue to accept. It'll continue to convert from the title automatically for you. But if you actually end up customizing it, let's say hello world everyone, that's going to be the custom title. Now it's like locked in as a custom title. So now if you change it, now if we change the title, notice how it doesn't update the title because you've customized it, so it's locked in at what you customized it as. Last but not least is that when we click edit here, if you decide, hey, I just want to go back to it auto-generating, you can click reset and it will automatically go back to generating from the title. So a pretty cool component. All of it's very customizable, and again, it's all in Vue.js. So now that you've seen how it works, I'm actually just going to fly through the code because you guys kind of see all the components of what it takes, of what we're trying to get to. This is the end goal. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the code now. We got this open, and like I said, we're going to be building a component for Vue.js. So to do that, what we're going to be doing is going into our JavaScript. We're going to create a component inside of this components folder. Let's actually just duplicate the example component, and we're just going to call this slug widget. All right. Just like that, that's an example component. Let's now go over to our JavaScript, our app file, and let's make sure to pull in this component so it's available in our application. And then we're going to call it slug widget. Okay, so that's what we do. So we now have access to our Vue.js component here called slug widget. And if we wanted to jump into well, let's create the widget first, then we'll add it to our HTML. So here's the HTML inside of the widget now. So I'm inside slug widget.vue. Here's inside the component. And then from inside of here, let's go ahead. You do need to have one wrapper div for everything. So we're going to go ahead and create that. And then let's go ahead and create the HTML structure. Now there's three components. As you might remember, we had the icon, we have like the link portion, and then we've got the buttons that exist. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's a good start for us to start working with the HTML structure. So as you can see, everything's wrapped inside this slug widget, and then we've got a wrapper for our icon, a wrapper for our URLs portion, and then a wrapper for our button. Now the reason these are all wrapped is because I want to treat each of these wrappers as an individual item so that we can use some Flexbox magic. So let's go ahead and add our CSS to make this actually kind of come together. Okay, so I think that's a good place to get started. We're just going to basically, we grab this slug widget. All of these will be aligned, starting basically aligned to the left, and they're all flex items. It should be handled pretty well. Okay, so from there, basically what we can do, let's go ahead and just test this in the browser, make sure it looks good. So now that we've created the basic for our component, we can go ahead and use it inside of our templates. So let's head over to our view and do that. Let's see, manage, posts, and create. Okay, so right here we want to create that. Now you can see we already had this component from the previous video. We outputted just a plain blog tag, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to replace it here with slug widget, right? So we'll say slug widget, and there we go. That's really all we need. Now I did realize actually we do need to put some content in here just so it looks we kind of what it looks like. Okay, and I want to add that highlighter effect here. So let's add that highlighter effect to the slug. Okay, so now that that's all set up, let's go actually into our browser and check it out. Okay, so there we go. We've got it open in our browser. So you can see the basic structure, the look of it. That's all done now for the most part. Everything looks good. And then you can see here we've got our post, and we have it highlighted with that yellow look, which I think is cool. I do want to add some padding there. Let's just come back to this and let's add some padding around the slug. So we'll just add like 3 pixels top and bottom, 5 pixels left and right, and then come back over, refresh, just give it a little more space. Okay, there we go. That's the basis of our application, or of our component. We've got the actual, like, it's set up correctly and it looks nice from an HTML and CSS perspective. Now the next step we want to do is actually turn this into something dynamic. Okay, so we want this to actually, now we're going to want to start using Vue to make this look good. We also need to figure out how to customize elements like the URL and stuff like that. We're going to need to clean up grab the URL from the post. So there's still several steps we need to do. That'll be kind of the next section, and then we'll get into worrying about the edit functionality and stuff like that. But let's just create some properties, some props for our Vue.js component so that we can set these up and use them. Okay, so let's do that. So come over down here to the bottom and we'll start that process. I like to start with the props first because, I don't know, just kind of feels like a good place to start. So we'll have 3 components. We're going to have our main URL right here. We have our subdirectory here, and then we have our slug, okay? So okay, now for the last one, oh, sorry, but not slug. We want to do subdirectory. Okay, there we go. And now let's go ahead and do the slug. But we actually don't want to do the slug, I realized. We want to be able to construct the slug. We don't want to pull the slug in directly as a property during the construction process. So what we do want as a property is the value of the title, because the title is separate from the component, because the component is just this. So we need the value of the title because it doesn't pertain to the rest of the project. So let's get the title. And of course, that's going to be required too, because without that, we can't do much. Okay, there we go. We got the three main components that are properties that we want. Let's just go through now and just kind of configure these up here. But we don't have our slug created yet. We need to determine what the slug is based off the value of the title. So let's set up the slug as a traditional data prop, data value. Okay, so when we configure the slug, we basically, just to get started, we'll set it up equal to the title of the blog post, right? So we'll just say this.title. That way, when we configure the slug at the beginning, the slug will be equal to the title. Let's set this up real quick. That way we get two-way binding with title, with whatever values inside of input, and then that gets passed into our component. That's kind of the goal. All right, so down here we don't have title yet. We'll just set it equal to nothing at default. And now I think we should be able to go. So, well, it's not going to update. That's the one problem. So I guess to test this real quick, where'd it go? Here it is. Let's just hard code a title value actually. Okay, so like that's an example of a title. So let's refresh. So there is no title here, but you can see it does input there. So our slug is equal to the value of title. Now, the only thing that we need to do that's different is we need to convert this title, which has capital letters and spaces and maybe apostrophes and stuff. We need to convert that to a slug type, a valid slug thing. And that's what we're going to use this node slug plugin. This is a JavaScript script, basically, that follows the RFC standard for URLs, and basically we can just use this slug variable, pass in our string, and it's going to convert it. It even works with Unicode, so you can see here, if you do I heart Unicode, it actually translates that to I love Unicode. You can do all sorts of cool stuff here. You guys can take a look at this. I'll have all of this linked in the description. So we're going to go ahead and Npm Install Slug. We'll bring that in and use that to configure our slug. So let's do that in the browser. Open a new tab. We'll do yarn add slug --dev to bring it as a dev dependency. Perfect, we have it. Now let's go to our app.js and let's go ahead and configure that. Okay, so there we should have access to that. The other thing we need to do here is we do need to set some defaults. So we want to set the default mode equal to the RFC standard. So you can see down here when we get to options, we can set a default mode that it follows. There's pretty mode and there's the RFC standard mode. We want the RFC, that's a URL standard standard that we have. So now whenever we do slug, it'll automatically follow that standard. Okay, great. So now we can go to our slug widget, and down here, what we actually want to do is convert this to a slugified variable. So we'll use this slug function and then this title. And now if we come back over to our project, we should now get an error. Required is not defined. Okay, so I did required. It needs to be required. My bad. Let's let that refresh real quick, and then there we go. But now you can see that now it actually converts that. So we didn't change that. It still has the capital H and everything that got passed in, but it's converted to a lowercase now. Perfect, so that's good. So now the next step is let's make it so that as the title changes here, it automatically updates this slug as the title changes. So let's see. So by default, we will set it equal to title, the slug value equal to title. But then every time title changes, let's update the slug value to be the new slugified version of title. Okay, so to do that, we'll just use watchers. So we'll say watch. And actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and set up a method. And I want the method to be to convert the title, basically, just since we're gonna reuse this convert title function a lot. So let's create a method real quick, and we'll just say convert title. And then that method can just be a really simple function that just returns that slug value of this.title. And now we don't have to reuse that. So instead up here, we'll just say this convert title. Like that. Okay, so, oh, we need a, sorry. I got an error. Let's see if that worked. Oh, it's not going to work because of this. Okay, convert title. I think that's good. So now we can set up our watch properties. And now let's watch that title. And whenever the title changes, let's go ahead and just run the, we'll run this convert title. There we go, like that. So now let's go, before we check it out, we need to update this here to dynamically bring in the value of title. That way it's automatically updated. All right, so now let's come back over here, refresh, and now let's change our title. Right, so you can see it works. Works great, okay? So that's happening, that's working really, really good. Let's see, what's kind of next? One other thing I noticed when I was doing this, when we have no title, I don't really like this empty yellow thing. So let's just go ahead and tell it inside of our component at the top here. Let's just do a vShow on that slug. So here's the slug. This is what's generating that yellow highlight. And let's just say if there's no value for slug, let's not bother showing it. So we'll just say vShow if slug. And now that should only be valid. If there is no slug, we don't see anything. And then as soon as we start typing it, it shows up. But then when the title goes empty, it goes away. So that's really clean. All right, so we're most of the way there. The next thing I want to do is this value for slug is held inside of our component. We need to be able to pass the component or that value back out to the parent, the main Vue object on our page. So it's outside of our component. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Of course, the way that you do that in Vue is you generally emit an event. So you'll trigger an event and pass it in through the event. That's how you move. That's how you're supposed to move values from a child component up to a parent component. Generally, there's only one way binding from the parent down to the child. And then to move it from information from a child to a parent, you need to use an event. So that's what we're going to do. So let's now create another watcher to watch that slug, and anytime the slug changes, we will emit an event that passes that value back up to the parent. So then our parent can listen to it with normal value, with normal like events. Okay, so down here under watch, in addition to watching the title, we'll also watch the slug. So we'll just say slug. We'll grab that new value, and then we will say, we're just going to emit the event. So we'll say this dot event, or emit, and then we will give it slug changed is the name, and then we'll pass in the value the new value that was submitted. Okay, great. So that's all we need to do for that, and then we can listen to that on the parent component. So now up here, let's go ahead and listen to it. We'll just say slug changed equals, and let's give it a method. So we'll say update slug. Like that. Now let's go ahead and create this method here to process that. This method is basically update slug. Oh wait, no, we need methods. Methods, and then we'll do update slug. Okay, so then when we trigger that, we should get that argument in from the event that was triggered on the child component, and this will get processed. And all we want to do is basically set this.slug, but we don't have one yet, so let's create it, slug. There we go. So now we want to set this.slug equal to the new value, right? Just like that. So now that should get updated. Let's test it real fast. Okay, great. So we have hello world. We've got that hello-world. Let's just check out this Vue project. So root. Now our slug is equal to hello world. So that's great. Now, before we continue on, there's one last thing I want to do. I do want to this convert title. Whenever we convert the title, or sorry, when we watch the title change, before we run this convert title, which runs this slug, which because the way it gets processed, it's not super expensive, but it's a semi-expensive function to run. I only want to run that basically every like half second or quarter second that the user is typing it. So we want to create a debounce function. So let's do that. So let's come up here and just debounce it. So we'll say debounce. I'll use Lodash, of course. And then let's set this up like that. And then we'll say every 250 milliseconds, like that. Okay, so now it should only run every quarter second. Okay, so you see there's like a minor delay. Now the reason I want to set up that debounce function is because this is a semi-expensive function, although I probably wouldn't worry about it for just this function. But eventually what we need to do, and we'll do this in a different video in the next video because I don't have API authentication set up yet, but we need to set up API authentication, and then I'm going to need to create an API request that takes this value of this new value that we just generated and makes sure that it's unique. And so we need to push it to an API request, make sure it's unique, and then set slug equal to it. And because of that, because we're doing an API request, we don't want it to run every every 10 milliseconds. So setting it to 250 or 500 milliseconds helps out a lot with that because the API functions are very expensive. Okay, great. So that's basically all we need for that. We basically have the primary function set up. Now, the last part that we need to do is we need to allow the user to basically edit this. So we type in hello world again. We get that. We want to be able to click edit and to customize that value. So let's go ahead and do that. So back over inside of our widget, up here at the top, we need to create that input value. Now we also need to create a few buttons. And then we need the ability to toggle these on and off. So we need to know whether we're in editing mode or like customization mode, or whether we're in like just display mode. So I want to create a variable called isEditing that shows whether you're in an editing mode or not. If you're in an editing mode, we want to show the input and this save button. If you're not, then we want to show the edit button and the normal slug. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say vShow equals isEditing. So if we're editing, we see this. And then up here, we have vShow for slug. We also need to say if there's a slug and isEditing is false, then we want to show the slug. All right, and then down here for the save button, isEditing as well. So if isEditing is true, we want to show that. And then if isEditing is false, then we want to show the edit button. Okay, well this value doesn't exist, so let's go ahead and create it. By default, we'll set it to false because by default it's not going to be, we're not going to be editing at the beginning. And then what we need to do is create some events so that when we click the edit button, we change the value of isEditing. And when we click the save button, we change it as well. Now we could just do something like click equals not isEditing. So like you could do this just to flop it around, but what you'd have to do isEditing is whatever. You guys get the idea. So we could do this, but the thing is I'm going to want to add other stuff in here. So we'll just throw this into a function, into a method. So we'll just say edit slug. And then we'll also down here, we'll create one. And this will be save slug. Okay, so let's go create those methods now. So down here. Okay, so now at least it should toggle back and forth. Let's just test this real fast. So, right, so we got our value here. If you click isEditing, oh, we have to prevent propagation. So let's just add that to both these, like that. Come back over. Okay, now we have edit and then save. It toggles it back and forth. Now you can see that the value isn't passed into the input, so we're going to go ahead and process that now. But at least the toggling does seem to work. Now we do get a jump here. If you notice when we click save, if you watch this, see how it's jumping? Doesn't look super smooth. What we're going to do is just, let's make this a little taller and center it. So let's just come up here and let's just make this whole URL wrapper just taller. And then we'll make everything centered with Flexbox in the middle. So let's just go ahead and set this height here to like 30 pixels. And then we'll do a flex of all the items, and then we'll just align them center. just like that. And then we should get rid of that. There you go. See how it doesn't jump anymore? Super smooth. Cool. All right, so now that that's done, we were going to make sure that our input box here has the value of the slug. Okay, now we don't want to just put slug in here because we're going to be changing the slug, and we don't want to set up like vmodel binding to change the slug directly because the slug has to be valid, right? So we're going to need to process the slug that's inputted into the normal slug before it's saved into that normal slug. So let's create a different model that is custom slug. And that way we kind of know the custom one versus the normal one. Now we need to create this, of course. And now when we click that edit button, what we want to do is we want to set the value of slug equal to custom slug. So then when they click that button, it looks like the value would be inside of that input box. So up here when we edit the slug, let's take the value of custom slug and set it equal to the current value of the slug as it is right now. And that way that value will be inside of our text box. Now when we save the slug, we want to basically do the opposite. We want to take the value, because now custom slug might be different and they might have changed it, and we want to take that, process it using our convert our slug method, and then we want to save that to the new value for slug. So now that when it flips back over to show the hard-coded slug, it shows that updated value. So we'll say this.slug equals this.custom slug, but we need to process it with that slug function. Like that. Okay, so now this should be good to go. So now let's refresh. Hello world. Now we see hello world. If we click edit, we have the value of hello world. And now if I change it and click save, now you can see that this this value is updated, right? So now if we make any changes like that, now the new value is there. And if we look at the slug on the parent element includes that hello world every, because it's still being sent out as part of, because we changed slug's being watched, it gets passed out as an event. Inside our slug widget, we have hello world every, so they're the same. Okay, great. So the one thing that you may notice doesn't happen right now is, now let's go through, so this is working fine, we can change this, right? This works great until we say we add to here. Well, then that change in the title takes over. This isn't a very good functionality because generally if someone goes through the work of customizing a URL, we can probably just assume that they want to keep it that way, and we don't want to be automatically generating it over the top of what they've already customized. So what we need to do is we need to basically, as soon as someone customizes the URL, we need to set something so that we know it's been customized, and then not edit the title automatically if it's been customized. We just let them have that. Okay, so let's do that now. So to do that, what I want to say is I want to create another Boolean value. We have is editing if it's currently being edited. Let's create one called was edited, so we know whether it's been edited before. Now, basically, as soon as someone edits this for the first time, we'll set was edited to true, and then we need to conditionally, before we change anything, we need to check to see if it's been edited before by checking the value of was edited. Okay, so to do that, we can basically just down here in our functions, we can when we save it, that's when we would want to change the was edited, because at the point that you save it, that's when you've edited it, and then at that point we want to lock in what you edited it as. Okay, so we will say this was edited is equal to true. And now it's going to be, every time you click save, it's going to be equal to true. Now, one thing I can think of that might cause problems is if, let's say someone edited it, but then didn't change it, and then just click save to basically cancel it. In that case, we wouldn't want to change was edited to true. So let's go ahead and just do that conditionally. So let's say if this.customSlug is equal to, or no, if it's not equal to this.slug, so that means it's changed. Then we want to go ahead and then change this.was edited to true, okay? So we only want to change it here if there's been some sort of change between the custom slug and the slug, right? Because we set them equal here. If someone just clicks save to cancel, then these will still be equal, in which case we don't want to change was edited to true, but we still want to do these other things, right? All right, now the last thing is now when we have was edited, we also are going to want to make sure that we don't change the title. So down here, it's going to be good to have another if statement that says if was edited is equal to true. So if it's been edited, then we don't want to change this slug. So I guess we actually want to do if this is equal to false is actually what we want to do. False, like that. Okay, then what we want to do is convert that. Perfect. So we're only converting it if it's never been edited. We got to do this dot was edited. Okay, now let's try it again. Okay, so we get that. We have the value. Hello again. Okay, we have that. Now if we click edit, let's edit it. Click save. And now if we change it, it should not update. It's not updating, right? Not updating at all. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. And if I refresh here and say hello world again, we get it updated. Let's click edit, but this time not change anything, click save. We still want it to be updating now, right? And sure enough, it does. So that's working good. All right, great. Now, let's see. What else do we have to do? I think that's everything other than the reset button, and then we're done. So if you guys saw in the demo, we had another button over here to reset that would basically, if you have customized this before and you want it to go back to auto-generating the value, then we would reset it. So we had another button that triggered that. So that's easy for us to do. Let's create another button. We'll just copy the ones we already have, and then we'll just say reset. This time we will, when we click it, we'll say reset slug is the value, and we want to show it if editing is true, just like this one. So everything else can basically stay the same. Okay, great. So now that we have that, let's come down here and create that method. So we'll say edit slug, or no, reset slug, I mean. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to take the value of slug, the initial slug, and we want to basically just convert it back to what the title is, okay? So we don't want to worry about custom slug anymore. So we just want to say this dot convert title, just to go back and set it equal to the value of title. So now slug is no longer the custom value, it's now the title's value. After that, we can, and then let's go ahead and we'll just say this dot was edited is false. Because even if it's true, we want it to now update automatically. So we have to set was edited back to false as if it was never edited. And then last but not least, we want it to go back into the slug mode out of the edit mode. So we want to set this is editing it also to false. And then we should be good to go. That should basically work. Hello world. Let's customize it. Save. Okay, it's not updating, but now if we click reset, we should update. Reset, there it goes. It goes back to the value of title, and now it should update again. So that's working perfect. All right, guys, well, there you go. That's everything there really is to do with our application here. So this works perfectly. We got a lot done, and hopefully you guys found it really informative. Now, if you do have additional questions, feel free to go back and watch the long version. Again, it's super long, but it goes into all of the details. But I think this one was hopefully good enough that it helped out 80% of you or so, and without needing to go watch the long one. But I made them both available because I was happy with how the other one turned out. All right, so I'm really happy with this project, this component. I think it's perfect. It's exactly what we need. We now have the value of slug in our, an input here that we can actually post this if we wanted to submit a post request and stuff. And this is working good. Now there is one functionality that's missing. We do need to basically run an API request to check to see whether this slug is equal to another slug. We want to make sure it's unique. If it's not unique, we need to customize it to make it unique. And that's the one thing that this doesn't lack. So we will have to come back at some point to add that functionality. But before we do that, we have to set up some sort of API authentication system before we mess around with that. But once we do it, it should be pretty easy, and then that's it. So hopefully you guys found this informative, and hopefully you guys were able to learn a lot. In the next few videos coming up, we are going to be working on the WYSIWYG editor, and then we're also going to be working on we need to add Flash messaging to our application, and then we're also going to be adding that API authentication so we can come back and finish up this component. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up. Be sure to stay tuned. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you love it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.